good hands and great hands. Hi, I'm Paul Wolf. We all know that good hands usually turn into losers. When it comes to all your insurance needs, our hands are unbeatable.
Call the Wolf at 835-9653 today.
Welcome to From the 300 Level. This is our first official podcast, and it couldn't come at a better time. My name is Frank Wolf. I'm with Tony Fiorello, one of our better contributors to the site. He's got his hands around the NFL, Bills, Sabres. I'm sure you read a lot of his stuff before in the past, so very glad to be catching up with him. But the Bills are going to be drafting. The NFL is holding their draft Thursday night. Tony, and I wanted to get you in here and get your thoughts on what you think the Bills will do versus what we want them to do. Where are the areas that they really need to address? What can they address heading into the draft tomorrow, Tony?
Well, first and foremost, we already know that quarterback is their top need. It's been a sore spot there for the last 20 years. Let's put it bluntly. Quarterback is a major need, and we know that at some point they're going to take one. Obviously, they let go of Tyrod Taylor, bringing in A.J. McCarron. I believe it's only a 2-year contract. It's only a 2-year contract, so Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott, they'll definitely be looking to bring in a new signal caller. There's a couple of other positions of need that they'd probably be looking to upgrade in. Right tackle will probably be a need that they could be looking at. Wide receiver, they sorely need an injection of speed at that spot. Perhaps another tight end to maybe go along with Charles Clay. They need some added depth on at defensive end to rush the quarterback. Linebacker, they could certainly need an upgrade there. And as they say, you can never have too many cornerbacks. They could always bring in another one. So they could be looking to get a new nickel corner. You never know.
Yeah. Tony, there's obviously a lot of chatter. And any time you get near the draft, usually the couple of weeks leading up, you get mock draft after mock draft. It's tough to gauge because GMs are tight-lipped, extremely tight-lipped about what they're going to do. I mean, as a fan or someone in the media, you can kind of sit back and say, well, we know they need this, we know they need that. Do the GMs listen to outside voices, or do they strictly look at the roster, see where they need to develop? Because, look, turnover is super high in the NFL, and pro sports in general. With GMs and coaches, they know no different. They are on limited time, borrowed time, if you will. So they have to make an immediate impact to turn that roster around or make sure that it's competitive each and every week. With that being said, with the signing of A.J. McCarron, who really doesn't have a laundry list of video to go by, of NFL experience, of course he's made some appearances, a former 5th-round draft pick out of Alabama. The Bills, I got to assume Brandon Beane is going to take a look at that roster, and he's said it before, he needs a quarterback. He knows it's a quarterback-driven league. But this crop of quarterback, there's a lot of infighting amongst media members. Nobody can agree on who the overall number one quarterback is. I saw Sam Darnold up close and personal against Notre Dame. I just thought he was very average, or a little above average as a college quarterback. But oftentimes, great college quarterbacks do not turn out to be great NFL quarterbacks. You know, Doug Flutie was supposed to be a terrible NFL quarterback. He did okay in Buffalo. Second time around, it took him 5-6 years to get better. You know, get up to Toronto, failure in New England, failure in Chicago, so to speak. He gets to Toronto, turns it around, and gets better as the years go on. Wins a couple Grey Cups in Buffalo. Does a pretty good job in Buffalo before losing his position. But there's a number of needs the Bills need. You said wide receiver. We haven't really had a good, solid wide receiver since Sammy, and even Sammy didn't necessarily have a great quarterback throwing to him, if you will. There's so many glaring needs. You got Richie Incognito leaving for God knows what reasons. You get a lot of holes. Eric Wood's gone. You're not sure what's going on with Kyle Williams. You seem to have addressed that with the offseason signing of Tule. But what should they do in the first round? You've got 2 picks. You got 12 and 22. Do you put the quarterback thing to rest and just trade up and grab Rosen if he's there? Who are the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks in your eyes? If the Bills are going to draft quarterback, who are the top 3 or 4 quarterbacks that are going to be available for them that they should take a hard look at?
Well, before I answer your question in regards to the quarterbacks, You're absolutely right. Front offices, they traditionally they don't listen to me. To be totally honest with you, if I were Brandon Beane, I wouldn't be listening to myself either. There's an old saying: if you listen to the fans and the media, you're going to be sitting with them. And so there's a reason why during the spring, basically between February, March, April, if a general manager is talking to the media and they say what they're going to be doing during the draft and whatnot, if anybody's a fan of Godfather 2, it's Frank Pentangeli's season. Basically, you're basically going to be lying. And just in order to be able to protect your front office, protect your franchise, and knowing what you're going to be able to do, you don't want your information to get out there. So no, they're not going to be listening to us. But anyway, in regards to the top quarterbacks in this draft, personally, I think the top two in my mind are probably Baker Mayfield, and I'm also a fan of Josh Rosen. I think he's just got this it factor to him.
Does he have the it factor that, say, a Carson Palmer had, or an it factor that a Peyton Manning had? Because both of them were highly touted quarterbacks coming out of college. Peyton Manning turned out to be this great all-pro, Super Bowl rings. Carson Palmer, you saw him, you knew he was going to be a good quarterback, but didn't necessarily have the postseason success that Peyton did. Still a great quarterback, and I think a lot of teams would take Carson Palmer, if they had the chance. But are you seeing more Carson Palmer, or are you seeing more Peyton Manning, or what?
Maybe a little bit of both, okay, to be totally honest with you. According to Greg Gabriel's Pro Football Weekly draft guide, he mentioned that, it says right here, let's see here, it says he's very smart, I'll be the first one to let you know. He can be difficult to coach and not the leader you want your quarterback to be. Outspoken and not as well liked and respected as a top quarterback should be. Well, at the same time, you also have to think to yourself, well, if he's, I don't know if he's necessarily
sounds a lot like Jim Kelly coming out of college.
Could be, yes. But Rosen, he can make all the throws, but he doesn't have the biggest arm. He's not like, for example, Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming. Rosen, some people like to say that he may be difficult to coach. Well, is that really more of an indictment of him, or is that an indictment of Rosen? A lot of people like to ask. A lot of people like to know the who, what, why, where, when, and hows of things. Sometimes coaches like to be able to just have people shut up, not ask questions, and just tell them, this is what we want to do. You got to learn it this way. This is what we want to do. Well, if a quarterback, if supposedly they're the leader of a franchise and they have to be the smartest guys in the room, well, if they can't ask why they have to be able to do stuff and why a concept has to be called, it's not necessarily a matter of them saying, oh, we have to change it. It's just wanting to understand the intricacies of a system and of an offense. And I think that could be more an indictment of a coach rather than the player. And if a coach is saying to themselves, and if they're scared of basically a quarterback asking them why, then maybe that's more an insecurity on a coach's part.
Okay.
Well, and I think Josh Rosen is, he may have a little bit of an attitude straight to him, but then again, Jim Kelly had the same kind of thing coming out of college. I'm not saying Josh Rosen is Jim Kelly reincarnated, but I do think
he's just pointing out that there's similarities. All quarterbacks are a little bit off. You want your quarterback to be a little off. You want him to challenge not only the coaching staff but his players. You want him to challenge. That's how you know you're getting the best out of him.
That's why you have to have an alpha male in that locker room, and it's not necessarily to challenge the coaches. It's to be able to get the best out of yourself, get the best out of your teammates, and be able to get the best out of the staff that surrounds you. You want to be able to make everybody to get better and be on one certain direction. And I think Josh Rosen just has this moxie and this it factor to him that I think that could really help him in the NFL and be able to really be able to expand his horizons in order to be able to really become an intelligent quarterback.
What is it about Mayfield?
Mayfield, I think he's just very, very accurate. He's also got that bit of an it factor. He's got some mobility to him. And the more I watch Baker Mayfield, the more and more I see Drew Brees out of him.
Okay.
I'm not saying he will be Drew Brees, but he's got some similarities. He's a very accurate quarterback coming out. He's got some mobility. He's basically about 6'0", 6'1", but that height isn't necessarily a factor. As long as you can be able to see over your line and be able to see passing windows and be able to anticipate and be able to be on time and be accurate, that's all that matters. You look at height. You see at first and knocked guys like Russell Wilson. It pushed him back in the third round. You see Michael Vick. You see Drew Brees. You see Doug Flutie. It didn't necessarily hinder their careers as quarterbacks, did it? No. And it could. Russell Wilson was pushed back in the third round, and you look back now. You look at it now. People will say, "Oh, Russell Wilson should have been a first-round pick." Well, height pushed him back, and now people might look at it and finally say, "Well, height isn't necessarily the biggest factor as people might think."
Personally, I like Mayfield. I like his competitiveness. I would not, if the Bills ended up with a guy like Baker Mayfield, I would be all in, and I think that would be a good pickup for Buffalo if they are going to go that direction. How do they get in a position to draft one of these two quarterbacks? Because you're back at 12.
Right.
With all the teams in front of them that also has the same burning desire to have a quarterback in the first round, how did Buffalo get there? They've gotten up to 12. They're going to have to get up to top 5 to get one of these guys.
In my opinion, Baker Mayfield's not going to last beyond the top 5.
Okay.
The latest couple of the latest rumors that I've heard is that Mayfield will go in the top 5, possibly to the Jets at 3. I've even seen some reports of Baker Mayfield going number 1 to Cleveland. It could be a smoke screen. They could like Sam Darnold the most. Baker Mayfield, if John Elway all of a sudden decides, well, I signed Casey Keenum to a short-term contract, he might not be able to commit to him beyond only maybe 1 or 2 years. Paxton Lynch, you never know. He may have drafted in the first round or 2. Personally, I wouldn't necessarily give up on Paxton Lynch after only 2 years. It may have been a bit of a project, but you've got to be able to commit to him maybe 1 more year or 2. But if he decides to go with a quarterback, it could be Baker Mayfield. If he lasts to number 5, it could happen.
How big of a factor is being able to sign that player? Do you think that gets into the equation at all? You know, it's the night before the draft, and you're speaking with Sam Darnold's agent. Hey, you know, we're thinking of a draft, and you're saying your player, you know, tomorrow first pick overall. You know, we got to talk finances here. You know, what are things of that nature? Is that going to play a part at all?
I don't believe so. Not at all. Because if you really think about it, ever since the NFL instituted the rookie wage scales in, I believe, 2011 or 2012, signing draft picks is not as big of a hassle as it used to be.
Okay.
Going back to basically around that time, there's basically a set slot. To say you were drafted here, these are the financials, this is what you're getting. Usually your first round rookies usually get 4-year contracts with an option for a 5th year. And beyond that, it's usually 3 or 4-year contracts from the second round on down. And I think unless all of a sudden somebody wants to pull an Eli Manning just totally out of the blue and say, hey, I don't want to play for this certain team and want to go somewhere else, I don't think it should be any sort of problem at all.
Good. Okay, so we have the 2 quarterbacks that you like. What do the Bills need to do, though? Because they do have glaring holes. We've mentioned the wide receiver position. Who are the top wide receivers coming out of this draft that you can see Buffalo making a pitch for? And again, just to remind everyone, we have a 12th, the 22nd, and the 1st, 53 and 56, courtesy of the Rams in round 2. In the 3rd, 65 and 96. No pick in the 4th round, 5th pick. 5th round, 166, and in round 6, 187. Do you see them packaging some of those late round picks? Well, hang on. Let's go to wide receivers, and I'll come back to that. Who do you like coming out of the college scene for as far as wide receivers go?
Top receiver, the consensus top receiver is Calvin Ridley, out of Alabama. He's going to turn 24 in his rookie year. He needs to get a little bit bigger, but he's quick in and out of his cuts. When he gets the ball in his hands, he basically becomes a running back. I've heard a lot of people compare him to Marvin Harrison coming out, basically. He's basically about 6'0", 192, basically about the same height and weight as Marvin Harrison was when he was with the Colts. He has good hands. He makes tough catches. good route runner, and is good, quick in and out of his cuts. I think he's the top receiver in this class. You never know. He could go probably between let's say 15 to about 25, around that area. If Buffalo stays around that area, you never know. They might be able to get someone of his caliber. Other people around that top slot. Cortland Sutton from Southern Methodist. James Washington, Oklahoma State. Let's see here. Christian Kirk from Texas A&M. Anthony Miller from Memphis. Even Dante Pettis from Washington. All these guys, they have their pluses, they have their minuses. Buffalo might be in play for all of them. James Washington in particular, it says that he's had basically a limited route tree, but he also has speed to burn. He ran a 4.45 40. This kid has good speed. Buffalo needs that speed. They have a dire need for speed. He could be one of those guys that they could get later in the draft. He could be somebody that they target.
Do you see players moving on draft day as opposed to just draft picks? Like if say the Bills might acquire a wide receiver from another team for a pick. Do you see that happening at all?
It could. It all depends on who's out there. I mean,
the reason I bring this up is there's a lot of talk about Odell Beckham, for example, in New York. There may be a possibility that they move on from him. I mean, they're not the Giants without Odell Beckham. I mean, they're not going to. I wouldn't expect them to be any good without Beckham, but
I don't see Odell Beckham being traded at all.
Okay,
he's a top 5 receiver. I think
Zay Jones too.
Yeah, Pat Shurmur, and Dave Gettleman. I think they're going to be able to put up with Odell Beckham's antics over the last couple of years. And it's not as if Odell Beckham is Terrell Owens or somebody of that, or Chad Johnson or somebody of that nature since the 2000s. By the way, I think he would have fit perfectly in that era. But over the last several years, those kind of receivers have kind of died out. But I think they know that they can't really trade Beckham. They're not serious about trading him. I think if in regards to somebody like Dez Bryant was out there as a free agent right now, I think Buffalo or whoever wants to look at him as a potential option. I think they're going to wait until after the draft to see what happens. If they can't get the guys that they want, they'll look into signing him, and we'll see what happens from there.
You mentioned tight end. Charles Clay, he's missed significant time, if you ask me, with the Bills last couple of seasons. I think he's been, a little above average. When he's on, But there's been a lot of when he hasn't been on, if you ask me. So what do we need to do at the tight end spot to upgrade there, or to a better complement to Clay?
Well, Charles Clay, when they brought him in to be their top tight end. He was arguably the best tight end that Buffalo has had on their roster, believe it or not, probably since the Pete Metzlars, Jay Reamersma era, because ever since then it's basically been a big hole.
Yeah.
It's basically been a big hole ever since then. Now, Charles Clay, he may not have the speed or the bulk of somebody like a Rob Gronkowski or a Travis Kelce or someone of that nature, or Jimmy Graham, who could really stretch the field. But he does have some size. He does have some hands. He can run routes decently well. He can also block. And his contract reflects that because he's more of an all-around tight end. But at the same time, Charles Clay, he's starting to get a bit up there. He's not old per se, but he's
a guy that's injury prone, in your estimation.
In the NFL these days, everybody gets hurt. People who like to use the excuse that Buffalo has injury problems all the time. Yeah, I could see where they're coming from, but at the same time, every team has to deal with injuries. Everybody's got to deal with injuries. But the difference, what separates the good teams from the bad teams, is depth of them. If somebody gets hurt, you got to be able to say this guy needs to step up. And if you have enough depth at certain positions, and if guys can step up, then you should be fine. Now, some of the tight ends in the draft that could go decently high, Hayden Hurst from South Carolina, Mark Andrews from Oklahoma, Dalton Schultz from Stanford. These are some guys who have some talent, and you never know. Buffalo could, at some point, they might, in the second, third round, they might say, okay, maybe we can have, depending on their value, where they have them on their draft charts, maybe they might be able to say, okay, these guys can complement Charles Clay well.
Tomorrow's a draft.
Yes.
You're Brandon Beane. Are you staying at 12, or are you going to do everything you possibly can to get into that top 5 so you can select Rosen or Mayfield?
Well, it's really kind of a dire situation because on one hand you have to get that quarterback in the future. I've seen mock drafts where Buffalo can possibly trade up with anybody. I've seen mock drafts where they can trade up to number 9 with San Francisco. I've seen mock drafts where they could trade up with the Colts at 6, Denver at 5, Cleveland at 4. The one everybody thinks that could happen is the Giants because of the connection with Dave Gettleman and Brandon Beane from their days together in Carolina. It could happen, but it might not. Dave Gettleman, over the last several years, he's kind of been averse to trading his draft picks. Doesn't necessarily mean that he might stay. He could trade out if what Brandon Beane offers him, if it's good, he might step back and say, "Hey, this might be an offer we can't pass up." He could possibly make that deal. I've even heard a rumor, whether it's true, whether it's not, of Buffalo maybe having a 3-way deal in the works with Cleveland and the Giants, where Buffalo might look to move up to even number 1 to take somebody like Sam Darnold. It could happen, might not happen, but it all depends. It all depends on Brandon Beane looking at the picks that he has, looking at the holes on his roster, and saying, we have holes that we need to fix. And at the same, you could also make the argument and say, okay, if Buffalo trades both of their first-round picks to move up, you toss in another second-round pick, you toss in another third, minus missing a seventh-round pick, Buffalo would have a completely normal draft. They'll still have another second, another third, another fourth, fifth, and sixth. They're missing a seventh. But you could also have to say to yourself, okay, if you're in love with one quarterback in this draft, whoever that may be, if you want to be able to go all in, a la Philadelphia with Carson Wentz two years ago, if you want to be able to make that move up, you've got to be absolutely dead sure that this is your guy who's going to be able to lead you into the foreseeable future for the next 10 years. If you're dead set on that, you make that move.
Is there a quarterback in this draft worth doing that for? Do you see it? As much as you like Rosen, as much as you like Baker Mayfield, are those guys that 10 years from now people can say that was the right move?
I think.
Can you honestly say that? And do you think Brandon Beane can honestly say that one of those two guys are going to make or break the Buffalo Bills for the next 10 years?
For the right price, yes. I think it could happen. Somebody like Sam Darnold, for example. If you're interested in, if they think that he's a perfect fit, okay. But at the same time, you have to realize with Sam Darnold, he had a great 2016. Last year, not so much. He turned the ball over quite a bit last year. You've got to be able to work with him and to be able to take some of that sloppiness out of his game. With a guy like, for example, Josh Allen. If you're in love with his intangibles, the size, his arm strength, if you think he's the next coming of Ben Roethlisberger, okay, then you can go ahead and make that move. But you've also got to be able to work with him, his accuracy issues. You also have to realize that with him coming out of Wyoming, it's a Division II school. There's things that happen in the NFL at a much faster pace than they do at the level that Wyoming played at. And you also have, and completion percentage was low, but at the same time, you can't necessarily marry accuracy and a completion percentage. Completion percentage does not always equal accuracy. It could be because of his coaches. It could be because of the system that he was in. It could be because of their play calling and the talent they had around him. On one hand, you could also say, okay, quarterbacks make the receivers around them better. But there's also another way of looking at the receivers they have around them. Could they make a quarterback better? With Josh Allen, another thing you could also look at is I recently watched a tape on via Dan Orlovsky, longtime backup quarterback on the NFL. He had a video up on Twitter the other day where he was watching one of his Josh Allen's games recently. He pointed out that one area of Josh Allen that needs to be worked on is his pre-snap recognition. At times he looked surprised when certain blitzes came out, and against with certain concepts, you've got to be able to know where your hot reads are against certain blitzes. Josh Allen struggled against that, and you have to be able to work with him in order to be able to get those spots and then those areas rectified. Now, if you're convinced that this is the guy who can turn around your franchise, then you got to be able to pay the price. Buffalo did that with J.P. Lawson several years ago. It later came back to haunt them because he was clearly the fourth quarterback in that draft behind Roethlisberger, Eli Manning, Rivers. But if you think that this is a guy that can turn around your franchise and you're dead certain that you pull that trigger, but the thing is though, you've got to be right. Because otherwise, if you mess up and you screw up, you're basically going to set this franchise back for another 5-10 years.
And you'll be looking for work in a year or two.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep,
and you'll be sitting with the media and the fans just like you don't want to be.
Yeah.
But
Rexes.
Yeah, really. But you could also, but at the same time, like I said, Bean and McDermott have to weigh that risk factor against the fact that they also have holes that they've got to fix, that they've got to plug. You got to be able to be able to strike that certain that certain. You've got to be able to weigh those certain risks against the rewards. But also Buffalo. At the same time, when it comes to making a trade, if Buffalo can't make the trade up to where they want to be, you have to remember it takes two to tango. Brandon Beane may make his absolute best offer. He might say, "Okay, we'll toss in 2 firsts this year, a second, a third, and maybe even be able to get it in next year's draft, toss in another first." There might be great offers, but it also takes two to tango. What if another general manager doesn't want to make that deal and move down? All these factors come into play. Yeah. If they can't make that move up to where they want to be, you can't necessarily blame Beane. You also have to be able to blame who he's trying to make a deal with, whether they want to make that move or whether they think that move is conducive to what they want to do in the future.
Good stuff with Tony Fiorello. This is Frank Wolf from the 300level.com. That's your draft preview for what the Bills may or may not do Thursday night down in Dallas. Interesting couple of days here, Tony, between now and Thursday night. So I know, where do we find you on Twitter?
You can find me on Twitter at Anthony Fiorello, and you'll be you can look out for my takes and whatever my thoughts are on the current situation and see what happens.
Looking forward to a draft preview you're going to have out for us, and we'll hook up again on the next show. We'll talk more about the Bills, and we'll get into some Sabres talk probably next week. But thanks again for coming on, and we'll talk to you guys after the Bills draft.
Should be a fascinating time.
The North End Bar and Grill in Kenmore is the perfect place for friends to get together, enjoy a great menu that includes all the local favorites like wings, roast beef on weck, and the best Friday fish fry in town. Serving daily specials like spaghetti and meatballs, flavorful hamburgers and barbecued ribs, and enjoy 12 beers on tap, including IPAs. The North End Bar and Grill, located at 2692 Elmwood Avenue near Girard. To order takeout or to reserve a table, give us a call at 877-9000 or visit us on the web at northendbarandgrill.com.